Really crazy to see all this, Griff, particularly because we're just on the heels of covering Seattle and the autonomous zone. And there are so many political leaders around the country in these cities, so many mayors, so many governors refusing to do their jobs. It's really stunning to see the amount of violence and the amount of destruction that they have allowed to ensue. And now many of them saying, well, we don't want the feds in our city, particularly in Portland. Well, what other choice is there at this point?
Well, what was stunning, Jed, I think, is that this morning we're now talking about the local officials there abdicating their responsibility, their fundamental responsibility to protect the life and liberty and property of their citizens. And the Portland mayor, Ted Wheeler, was absolutely blasting the president and the DHS on Friday, saying essentially that never mind what's happening in our streets for 7 straight weeks, night after night, causing $23 million plus damage to downtown businesses in Portland. This is all about President Trump's attack on democracy. Here's what the mayor said. Listen.
The videos, the pictures, the experiences that we're all witnessing here in Portland should be shocking to all Americans. The words and actions from President Trump and the Department of Homeland Security have shown that this is an attack on our democracy.
We want to bring in now Georgia Congressman Doug Collins. Congressman, what do you make? I mean, when you look at what's happening in Portland, is it lawlessness and anarchy in the streets, or is it an attack on democracy, as the mayor says?
Well, I'm not sure what the mayor actually understands democracy to be. I mean, riots and peaceful protests are two different things. When you're destroying $23 million worth of property, when you're burning buildings, when you have absolute chaos in your street, he doesn't understand the very basics of government, and that government is there to keep and have in place a civil order so that people can feel safe in their communities. There's no way this mayor can feel and say to the people of Portland that you are safe and that you can go out and do the things that people of freedom under our law and civil order of government can do. This is just disgraceful that a mayor would believe that anarchy is the way it's looking right now is actually normal. And to attack the president for your own failures, mayor, look around your city. It is burning because you are the mayor. You need to take responsibility. The president is actually trying to help, and DHS is trying to help because they're not going to turn a blind eye to those who want to wantonly destroy property. This is not about civil protest. This is about destruction and lawlessness. The mayor of Portland probably needs to step down because he's definitely not being a mayor. He's just being a social commentator.
Congressman, it's Jason Chaffetz. You sit on the House Judiciary Committee. Does Nancy Pelosi and Jerry Nadler, the chairman of that committee, or any other committee in Congress, are they bringing in any of these Democratic governors, attorney generals, any of the people that are mayors, say, of Portland or Chicago or New York? Are they having any sort of hearings or emergency meetings about the violence, the riots, the things that are going on? Is any of that happening in Washington, D.C.?
No, Jason, it's awful. You've been there before. You understand what this is going through. We have a Democratic majority and a Speaker of the House who undoubtedly hasn't, looked around to see what's going on. When she talks about, people will do what they do, and Jerry Nadler is just not been a competent chairman for 18 months. We've seen that when he's just attacked the president. They're not bringing anyone in. In fact, they're just allowing it to go on. They want to cause, it looks like, this turn a blind eye because they believe that the November election will hinge on, if the president can handle the issues that are going on, which I believe he will. But they're just more focused on winning elections than they are actually governing. And what's sad is that people's property is being destroyed, people's lives are being lost because these mayors and these governors will not do their job until they do a couple of things, until they get rid of their own security details, until they actually go out and find out what their police do on a day-to-day basis so that they can get rid of the bad officers and get rid of those folks that need to be got rid of, but yet bring order to their cities and order to their states. Then I just wish that they would frankly do their job or shut up. I'm tired of seeing these mayors and governors and also Speaker Pelosi and Jerry Nadler just abdicating their responsibilities in order to win elections. This is sad.
Congressman, you just mentioned Speaker Pelosi. We have a statement in part from her that we're going to read now that says, while Portland is the president's current target, any city could be next. We live in a democracy, not a banana republic. We will not tolerate the use of Oregonians, Washingtonians, or any other Americans as props in President Trump's political games. The House is committed to moving swiftly to curb these egregious abuses of power immediately. You know, I don't really understand what Nancy Pelosi isn't seeing, Congressman. If you look at these images of what's going on in Portland, very similar to the images we saw in Seattle, it's terrifying. It's terrifying for citizens to live there. It's terrifying to own a business there. What is she not getting about the complete abdication of leadership by Democratic mayors and governors in those cities and states?
Well, she lives in a bubble with her own security detail that goes with her everywhere. She feels safe wherever she goes, and she just assumes that the rest of the world is okay. These are not civil protests. I'm not sure. Maybe she needs to have an eye exam on Monday instead of, coming to work, because right now, when you look at this, there's no way that you can see this as normal. There's no way that any city in this country or any state can allow this to continue. And what is right now is happening is again, notice what is happening. Instead of dealing with the issues and the problems of those who are causing destruction and causing terror in these cities, she is focused on a election with President Trump. She's the one that's actually abdicated her responsibility. We've seen it in how she's run the House for the last 18 months. She won't even let us come back and have regular debates in order. She keeps everything closed up. And then she turns around and attacks the president when it is these folks who are in these cities and these Democratic mayors and governors who are allowing this to happen and then blaming the president for it. Look, when you don't know how to do something, either get out of the way and let somebody who knows how to control this happen, or just quit complaining about to other people. We've got to get law and order back here, and that means that everybody's rights are taken care of. Civil protests are the hallmark of our country. They are what we absolutely have, because that's how we express ourselves to the government. But wanton destruction of property and riots, that's criminal activity. And the mayor of Portland and the Speaker of the House share one thing in common. They're blind to the realities of their streets because they're so focused on a political agenda they can't help their people.
Congressman, I think Speaker Pelosi and many others are criticizing. They saw on social media a video of federal officers with no name tag, putting individuals suspected of destroying property in unmarked vans. They haven't run from that, the administration, DHS. They say these are necessary tactics for the safety of the officers, and these were individuals suspected. We'll see how it plays out. I want to move forward, though, into this coming week, because you guys are back in session along with the Senate. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell going to roll out his phase 4 coronavirus relief package coming up next. There's quite a lot of disagreement. Where do you see things headed tomorrow?
Well, I hope that there's more discussion about what's going on. I think as we look ahead to this possibility, there's areas in which we can come into agreement on, especially in dealing with maybe some of our smallest businesses, dealing still in some of my areas with the service industries and others that are still trying to come back. But also we need to recognize the fact that we have to encourage our economic activity while at the same time being safe in this, because the extra federal unemployment has caused worker shortages in many of our businesses here in Georgia and across the country. We need to start phasing back that or do away with it altogether. We also need to make sure that the monies that we've already sent, and Jason and others who know this, who've been in Congress, know that sometimes we just send out money, but we put restrictions on it to where they can't use it. My question is, are we going to allow the states who've already gotten money maybe to redirect it so that they can help their economies, help their governments react to this COVID crisis? What we have to understand, though, is that we just can't keep putting money toward this of the long term. There has to be a way out of here where we protect our economic interest in our small businesses and others, and then move forward with the health and safety to get our schools reopened and get our governments going again. My hope is that will happen. We need liability protection for these businesses who are opening and looking forward. And, even those are the kind of things that we need to talk about. I'm hoping it's more of a conversation than just here it is, take it or leave it.
Congressman, shifting gears just a little bit to the very sad recent news of the passing of Congressman John Lewis, we'd just like to give you a chance to honor and remember your colleague.
Well, he's just an amazing man here from Georgia, and I share a very special memory. In 1987, I was an intern in Washington, D.C., and every morning I would get on the elevator in Cannon Office Building, and it seemed like Congressman Lewis John would get on the elevator with me, and we shared some really interesting times. We'd go to the same floor. We would share, both being from Georgia. And then a few years ago, when I came to the House, I went to him, and he and I had talked, and I said, John, I said, you remember when we were riding those elevators up there? And he just got that grin that he always had about him, and that special, sweet spirit. And he looked at me and he says, Doug, don't make me feel old. He said, I'm not that old. And he just sort of chuckled. But we shared just a commonality of love for people. We shared a passion of both being pastors in our own right and doing that. the country is mourning the loss of a hero here, someone who stood forward and went forward on his ideas. We may not have always agreed politically, but when it came to the decency of human beings, John Lewis was unmatched in his parallel to make sure that everybody felt included and felt valued in the eyes of God, because he was a man who had that same compassion for people.
Well, Congressman, like you, it was an honor and privilege to serve with Congressman Lewis. When you meet with him and talk with him one at a time, he was just a sweet, gentle soul. But boy, when he spoke, he had a powerful message and a true icon that I think we'll both cherish having spent time with him. So thank you for joining us this morning.